The Vatican recently approved a new rite of Mass for the Mayan region of Honduras and Mexico. Why was this new rite needed? And a parish in Switzerland launches a new AI exhibit of Jesus in a confessional. Riding in with analysis of these and other stories, the Papal Posse, editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org, Robert Royal, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray. Thank you both for being here. I want to start with the Vatican's recent approval of this so-called Mayan rite of the Mass for a small group of indigenous communities. The permission was granted by the Dicastery of Divine Worship. This is only the second officially recognized variation on the Novus Ordo since Vatican II, the other being that Zaire rite in Africa. Reports speak of elements such as ritual dance, women's as incense bearers in place of the priest, and lay leadership in certain prayers during this form of the Mass. Father, at a time when the Vatican is conducting an almost fanatical suppression of the traditional Latin Mass, why are we now hearing about these enculturated forms of the Mass, not only being cultivated but encouraged?
Well, enculturation has become sort of like the sacred object that cannot be questioned in the modern church. And I do question it because the culture that Catholicism established in Latin America is strong. And part of the strength of that culture was that it overcame paganism. And we should not be should not be including pagan elements in Catholic worship. It sends the wrong message. Catholic worship is a gift from God. Paganism is not.
Bob, we also know that there's a study underway of the Amazonian rite of the Mass for South America. Is this inculturation taken too far? I mean, it evokes all those memories of, we saw Pachamama in the Vatican garden and other pagan practices, as Father said, being incorporated into Catholic worship. What is driving all of this?
Well, I'm sorry to say that despite the denials on the part of the Vatican, this coming right after the Synod on Synodality raises some eyebrows. Look, the church has been in what we now call Latin America for 500 years, and there always has been enculturation when missionaries go out into new territory. But what have they been doing for the last 500 years that it made it important to announce this just now? That raises one suspicion for me. I was in Guatemala a few years ago at a Mayan cathedral there. And I can tell you that there's still a powerful Mayan, and I don't know if it's quite right to call it pagan, but certainly an alien culture that exists even in a cathedral in a major city where Mayan Indians are a strong presence. So I'm a little bit skeptical of this. I think that they're using the fact that these people down in Chiapas have proposed this Mayan rite. Despite their denials, to advance some of the things like women being more participative in the Mass, like innovations like liturgical dance. Although I have to say, if you look at the videos, this liturgical dance is pretty tame and not at all what we might imagine from our experience in Western liturgical dance, so to speak.
Yeah, I just don't know why we keep innovating new forms of the Mass as we throw out the old form that upon which allegedly the Novus Ordo is predicated and stands upon. I don't understand that. But at the same time, a year after the removal of Bishop Joseph Strickland from his post as the Bishop of Tyler, Texas, celebrations of the traditional Latin Mass are being forbidden by the Vatican in that diocese, and in the cathedral rather. Bishop Joe Vasquez of Austin, who's been the apostolic administrator there in Tyler since Strickland's removal, he made the announcement to parishioners that there would be no more Latin Masses at the cathedral, and it would also be halted in 4 other parishes, leaving only 1 parish offering the old rite. Bob, once again, we're seeing a systematic restriction of the perfectly valid form of the liturgy, and a key part of Benedict XVI's, he imagined, lasting legacy.
Yeah, I mean, it's curious. You can put this in humorous terms that we enculturate every culture except our own. We had 2,000 years of this Latin Mass, which still has a great power and attracts, as we keep saying, young people and families, and has the capacity to revivify certain parts of the church in the West. It just tells us that there's a kind of a bias in favor of this sort of progressive direction, as if there's no other there's no other life in the church. I think that's a mistaken turn. And I think that the more we see of it, the more we're going to be convinced of it.
Yeah, well, I don't want to put it in political terms, but when you ignore the vox populi, when you ignore where young people are, where families are growing, you can only do that for so long before that bubbles over and then everybody feigns surprise. Father, I want you to tie this to this abrogation of the Latin Mass in this particular diocese to this other story. This is an AI version of Jesus Christ created and mounted in a confessional in a Catholic church in Lucerne, Switzerland. This AI Jesus takes questions from the faithful. Organizers say it's an art exhibit not intended to substitute for sacramental confession, Father. But look, if tomorrow I put an AI Father Jerry serving Mass in your parish every hour, parishioners are bound to take that, make their own inferences. Your thoughts on this, and why place an artistic exhibit in a confessional at all, Father?
No, this is part of that modern deconstruction movement, which basically reflects a hatred for our heritage. It's also, to be quite frank, a blasphemous use of church facilities to do something that the organizers, they probably think it's cute and innovative and cutting edge, but let's look at what we're doing. We're reducing God to an achievement of human intelligence, that we can, create artificial intelligence, and now God himself is going to talk to us after the humans programmed him. Now, we are in an age of destruction of what is holy, sacred, and inherited. And what's the result? Paganism overcomes the Mass, and fake Jesus is put in a confession box so that people can make fake confessions. This is bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. Bob, this AI Jesus is programmed to converse about theological concepts fueled by content from the internet. And the question is, whose theology is being used to power this thing? As Father said, this is Jesus in your own image. There's something profoundly sinister about this, in my estimation.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of these so-called art installations in European churches, and I have to say, this one isn't even the worst. There are many worse than this. But look, confession is one of the places where something distinctive to Catholicism takes place. It's where God forgives our sins fully and forever. And to place this modern electronic machine in that spot, I think I can't imagine anything greater blocking off what is particular to the revelation that we have in Jesus Christ. I mean, other than the Eucharist. I mean, I don't want to suggest to anybody that they mess around with that.
I want to move on to something else here. A Chinese prelate, Bishop Xin Bin of Shanghai, announced a program this week in his diocese to study Xi Jinping, the president of the People's Republic of China. Bishop Xin Bin was appointed by the CCP and eventually approved by the Vatican as part of their secret pact. In a recent conference in the Shanghai diocese, diocesan clergy are being encouraged to study and spread through lay gatherings and sermons the documents of the third plenary session of the 20th CCP Central Committee and the General Secretary Xi Jinping's thought on Sionization of religion. Bob, there is no mention of the study of papal documents or Catholic theology. How is this justified by the Vatican?
Well, obviously, this has become part of that secret accord, that unpublished accord that we have with the communist government of China. And I'm extremely worried about this, because this synicization is not just adapting in a kind of an enculturation way, which is a term that they keep trying to use, to what is the Chinese cultural circumstance. This is a creature of the Chinese Communist Party. This isn't even the government. It's the Chinese Communist Party teaching Catholics to be in harmony with Xi Jinping. It's amazing to me that people don't recognize that this is about the closest thing to brainwashing that you could ask out of the church.
Father, the Cardinal Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, recently stated with a straight face that religious liberty is sacred and protected in China. Do you buy that, especially in light of this?
It's certainly not. I would respectfully tell the Cardinal, you want to test that theory? call Cardinal Zen in, have a half-hour conversation. Why don't you watch some videos of what's going on in China? No, this is the fruit of naivete and wishful thinking. If you think when you're nice to communists that they're going to give you what you want, no, they're going to take from you what they want. And this is precisely what's happening. This is, again, blasphemous. To consider that a Chinese communist leader is the subject of study so that his understanding of religion will be incorporated into the Catholic outlook in China. No, I'm going to guess that Lenin and Stalin are envious because they never went this far. But certainly Xi Jinping is getting what he wants.
It's amazing. I mean, even the words of the scripture have been changed to include Xi's thought and communist propaganda. I mean, how this can be embraced, I simply don't understand. But gents, I want to move on. The Vatican announced updated procedures for conducting papal funerals this week. Among the changes, dispensing with the traditional using of 3 different coffins for burial, opening the possibility of burying a pope outside of St. Peter's Basilica. And as far as the public viewing, the pope will be placed in a simple wooden casket instead of a raised bier that we've seen in the past. According to Archbishop Diego Ravelli, the master of ceremonies, Pope Francis has stated on several occasions the need to simplify and adapt certain rites so that the celebration of the funeral of the Bishop of Rome may better express the faith of the Church in the risen Christ. Father, your thoughts on these changes, are they merely practical, or is this Pope Francis' aversion to tradition sort of emerging? And what does it tell us that they keep underscoring this nature that he is the Bishop of Rome?
Well, a couple of things going on here. Of course, this does reflect the Pope's outlook. He's not big on ceremonial. He's not big on, the sort of historical trappings that go with events involving the Pope. Now, all I can say is that I think the people will be disappointed because, people enjoy solemnity and its external expressions. Now, the Pope has already told us he wants to be buried in St. Mary Majors, and they've already prepared a tomb for him there. So that's not a surprise that they would have that ritual. But, I'm one of those people that says, rituals that are done for so long have a presumptive legitimacy and value that may not be appreciated by the next generation. So rather than change things, we ought to look at them and see what they are, because the idea is not exalting a man. It's exalting the successor of Peter as God's representative. And exaltation is part of life. We want to look up to our leaders and we want to recognize their leadership.
By stripping ourselves of these traditions and these practices, you do hollow out the visual witness of the church too. I mean, we were all there at John Paul II's funeral, at Benedict's funeral. There is something majestic about the whole world coming together and mourning the passing of this leader, who's not a political leader, but a spiritual one. So you do need the grandiosity, if you will, of the presentation and the Swiss Guard standing by. This shouldn't be like, the afternoon funeral down at the local funeral home. I mean, it shouldn't be that. Or, a guy shoved in the back of the van like they did poor Pope Benedict. But, gents, before we run out of time, I want to get your thoughts on the U.S. Catholic Bishops' Assembly. Just wrapped last week. 2 interesting things emerged for me. The lay ecclesial ministers are back. I used to call them LEMs before they bounced me from covering the conference. They're so welcoming and transparent, but you can't cover it anymore, Raymond. The USCCB approved the drafting of a new doc to guide lay ecclesial ministry, a follow-up to 2005's Co-workers in the Vineyard of the Lord. And it related that Cardinals Supich and McElroy both called for the creation of a new committee on synodality. Father, has synodality breathed new life into this innovation of lay ecclesial ministry and ministers that, frankly, most of us, I guess, had forgotten about? I always said it was a bad idea.
Well, since we really don't know what synodality means, aside from walking together and listening to each other, we have to look at the main expression of synodality, which was the Synod on Synodality. And what was the headline news out of there? Lay people getting to vote at the same level as cardinals and archbishops and bishops. So there's obviously an attempt through this synodality thing to put lay people in charge, to give them authority, to give them directive power, to include them in decision making. So this is what this is all about. And that's very dangerous, because the priesthood based on holy orders is a gift from heaven. It's not a human creation. We should not take away priestly authority and give it to lay people. That's not the right thing to do.
Well, Father, if we do it, I hope they'll make us the triumvirate of the lay ecclesial ministry of information with full prosecutorial powers in the canonical courts, and you can be our representative at the court level. Bob, with the call for a new committee on synodality, as if the USCCB bureaucracy doesn't have enough on their plate, will this help us figure out what synodality actually is? Maybe that'll be the goal of the committee.
Well, on matters like this, I like the establishment of committees, and I hope that they take a long time to study the details of all the things that are implied by what they're trying to do, because we don't want to rush into anything on like lay ecclesial ministry. They can take their time, and we'll be happy to wait while they talk these things over. Look, this is the fallout. We know that here in the United States, most of what seems to be sound about that very vague notion of synodality has been in place for years. You know, we have lay boards that handle finances in dioceses and parishes. We have lay people advising bishops and priests about various things, and we have lay people involved. So, you know, if it were done the way we've been able to incorporate it in America, where these people are largely integrated into what is a traditional Catholic structure, it's a pretty good thing. It just seems to me that they keep overreaching this as if somehow this is something that no one has ever heard of in the history of the church. And I think that is demonstrably false.
Yeah, you know, Bob and Father Jerry, as the great Father Jim Gould said many years ago, 19 years ago, now that I'm thinking about it, when this lay ecclesial ministry thing first surfaced, he said, this is literally the clericalization of the laity. And meanwhile, we laicize the clerics. You know, this is ridiculous. It's an inversion of roles. We should be focusing on the things that work, the sacraments, and how to bring the gospel message to people, not creating new offices and hierarchies while we dismantle the hierarchy Jesus left us. Father, I'll give you the last word.
No, you're absolutely right, Raymond. And, you know, the beauty of the Catholic Church is that there's a divinely established order. And being a member of the flock is a great gift from God, because it means you're on the path to heaven. But the flock needs leaders, and God knew that. That's why he put the Pope, the bishop, the apostles, and the cardinals. And the greatest thing that can happen to a Christian is entrance into heaven, not become a lay minister, not exercise authority, not sign checks in a parish. So what are we talking about nowadays? We're always talking about structures and sharing power. What we really need to be talking about is, how do we get to heaven? How do we live a holy life on earth? How do we love our neighbor? That's what we should be focusing on.
Yeah, no, it all runs back to the first sin, pride. Father, we'll leave it there. Bob, thank you. And for more commentary by Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray, you can visit thecatholicthing.org. See you soon, gentlemen.